Jon Gillham is here, who is the founder and the CEO of Originality.AI, which is a trailblazing venture in the realm of artificial intelligence and content originality. They are an AI checker, a plagiarism checker, and a fact checker that lets you publish with integrity. So, Jon, glad to be speaking with you.
Robert, glad to be here. Happy to nerd out on all things AI and marketing anytime.
Yes, and it's quite a map to navigate, right? Because like sometimes you really want to get deep on the nerding, but then you pull out because you still want to be accessible and a communicator, but we can have fun doing all those sorts of things. And so Originality.ai, what is it? What does it solve?
Yeah, so it's for we originally built it for people that are hiring writers and want to know whether or not those writers had used ChatGPT to copy and paste the content. So a lot of us are happy to pay a writer $100, $1,000 an article, whatever the rate might be. Not super happy when you find out that they had copied and pasted it out of ChatGPT. And so that was kind of the core of how it started. And then we built in a lot of functionality to try and be sort of a complete quality control check before you hit publish in a modern content marketing era.
Very nice. And so you mentioned a couple of things already, right? That when you hire someone for writers, especially these days, like it seems very like it's devoid of emotion, devoid of personality. And some of these things like very closely read like ChatGPT. And you're saying like, why the heck would I pay $1,000 for an article when they literally spent 2 seconds just pasting it and got all the stuff back? And so we kind of look at this text and we say like, I don't know, is it ChatGPT or not? And so it's great to have this checker, and especially if you're checking things regularly, right? If you have a repeatable process, of course you want a tool like this because sometimes just your mind plays tricks on you, especially if you have to look at like 10 or 20 of these articles, like at this point I can't really tell or not. So there's that aspect of it, right? There's was it generated using AI versus a human? And then I also understand from looking at your website, there's also the fact checking. And this is also something that it's always in the news, right? About how AI makes things up. Some attorney used it for some kind of legal briefing and it like invented all kinds of like fake cases. And so tell us about that. Like when someone uses ChatGPT or a generative AI of some kind to make the content, sometimes it's inaccurate or completely made up. Is that right?
Yeah. There's like you said, there's some kind of sad but also hilarious sort of situations where hallucinations have caused big problems. We were just give us an example of one, but we were helped the newspaper The Guardian with a story where they were looking at some books that were on Amazon. One of the books in particular was about foraging, so picking mushrooms to eat them. And in the book, which we helped show was AI generated, it talked about tasting a mushroom to determine if it was poisonous or not. Obviously a bad thing to do, leads to death. But so I think in the world of generative AI, regardless of whether you're pro AI content or anti AI content on your website, everyone's pro factually correct information being published on their site. And AI is a great aid in helping people, helping to enrich facts that are in content that you're reviewing, to make sure that they're sourced correctly, to make sure that they are accurate. And so that's what we built with a fact checker to try and help editors go through the process of fact checking more efficiently. It's not auto fact checking, like it's still AI judging AI, so it produces some errors itself, but it enriches the information to help a human editor double check everything.
And that seems to be a recurring point when any kind of AI comes up in conversation or a podcast. The promise of AI is that, well, it does all these things on its own, right? You click a button and it just like the bots just run all day long. But then when you actually start to use it, then they say, oh, well, it's more of like your assistant. And so you use it to generate ideas or sometimes even like second or third level ideas, right? You have an article and you say, hey, find me some case studies about this. And it gives you stuff that's okay. And then you end up kind of going down a rabbit hole and you say, all right, well, I made this article that's maybe 20% better than it would have been, and it took me an hour instead of 5 hours, so it still helps me, but I still like play all these, I don't know if I'll get over it, but I play mental games with myself, and I just drive myself crazy by saying like, oh, well, I feel like I'm scrambling a lot when I'm doing the AI, right? I feel like I have like 30 tabs open instead of 5 tabs open. I feel like I sift through 50 ideas to get to 5 ideas. So am I alone in this in feeling like it's takes a different mindset of like 90% noise and garbage to get the 10% signal and the diamonds?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's times where it is predictably awesome, and perfect for what I want it to do, and there's times where it is um, unpredictable and not as awesome as I want it to be. And I think that's, and I think the expectations of what we when we first saw it, it just felt like magic. And then we're now starting to sort of bump up against its limitations and understand it. And what's fascinating about it is those limitations are not always obvious. It can crush some simple stuff, um, crush some complex stuff, and then struggle on some really simple stuff like math early on, or doing a picture that has the right spelling for a simple word. There's some things that are just like, feels like you should be able to do this, but it can't.
Right. And but then it's, I guess, so you're saying that it's helpful just to stay up to date on the news and know where those limitations are. That way you don't find yourself getting frustrated like first-handedly, right? Because like I had a conversation like a month ago or two where we were trying to make ChatGPT like write less like ChatGPT, and me and him were going about it the wrong way. We were saying, well, don't use the word testament, don't use the word delve. We were like picking out individual words, but it kept, sometimes it would just do it anyway or make up new words. And then we were like, okay, well, you are an SEO specialist, or we'd say
Yeah.
right at a ninth grade English level. And that kind of made it like not enough. But then we used our humanness to kind of fill in the gaps. And so, is there anything along these lines that like you yourself have noticed? 'Cause it's always fun to just kind of like go, like you said at the beginning, go deep in the trenches and geek out a little bit. So, like, what have you noticed in your own kind of firsthand AI experimentation?
Yeah, so I think along those lines, my probably most used personal use case for AI is, I'm an engineer. I prefer to communicate in spreadsheets, but the ability to custom train my own GPT on my own data, which is really just like uploading PDFs into a GPTs and saying write like me, and then it cuts out a lot of the words that there's no way I would use, and so I have a sort of blog post custom trained GPT, and I have an email custom trained GPT where it's all my own emails, all my own blog posts, and then when I feed it what I want it to write about or my ideas, it will return a draft that is far more similar to my writing, and not have the sort of the same ChatGPT big word joining stuff that goes on that doesn't like. Now let us now delve into the digital age of whatever. So like it has these really big complex joining sentences that I don't have in my writing.
Okay. And I'm glad you brought up this idea of the custom GPTs, because I feel like I'm like anyone where I don't have a full knowledge. I just kind of like, experiment here and there because it changes so quickly. And so I use Chat GPT every day. And then I've done a little bit in the back end with the API, like kind of the custom coding. And I
Yep.
saw just enough in there to just get scared and overwhelmed with all like the API calls and things like that. But I keep hearing about this whole idea of like custom GPT and like upload like just tons of content, all the files, the PDFs, and then that saves you just all the hassle of like uploading these whole transcripts in like a Chat GPT window every time. And so, as far as making these custom GPTs, like, do you use a custom tool for that, or is this in the Open AI backend, or like what's the process here?
Yeah, the process is as easy as chat. So it's basically it's not like if it's maybe half a step more complicated than just interacting with ChatGPT, and about 100 times less complicated than dealing with the OpenAI playground on the API. It's you open up if you're on GPT Premium or Plus or whatever the name is. You click on the GPTs, create a GPT, and then you can train it, and then you say create a I want to create a chat GPT. I want to create a custom GPT to write like me, and then you upload your PDFs, and then you have that available to you anytime you log into ChatGPT.
Very nice. And so there's like kind of two, that leads you to like two other kind of questions about the possibilities here. So like, um, there. So would you say, is it something maybe everyone should do? It's like upload as much, like upload a lot of your content, right? All the blog posts, like this podcast we're on. I think we're like 1,105. I'm really tempted to like dump. I think I have all the transcripts. Dump out all the transcripts, which with other AI tools is easily done. And I feel like just uploading all these text transcript files up to a custom GPT to have this whole knowledge base and be able to just like write all this blog post content. So like, is that a good idea? And then also you mentioned about like the having the GPT for like the email marketing and the like the copywriting, like what's involved in those? Sorry to give you two questions at once, but I'm just like super excited.
Yeah, no. So I think in your use case, I don't know if you have a blog post that goes with every podcast episode that goes out, but having it learn to say, hey, here's the like providing transcript and blog post examples, and then saying you're now my blog post writer. I'm going to provide you with transcripts. Here are some examples of transcripts that have led to and the resulting blog post. And if you were to feed it that information, my guess would be that it would produce next time you could go and just upload a transcript, and then the result from ChatGPT would be a formatted and consistent with all of your other blog posts for the podcast, and output that took the transcript, took what it had learned about how you typically would translate a transcript into a blog post, and give you a blog post that was pretty close to your desired end result. So that'd be the one case. And sorry, I forget the second part.
The second part was the like the blog post GPT and like the email
Yeah,
marketing GPT.
yeah. So I think um, some people will write the same in every setting. I think in my case, I found myself when I tried to use my blog, I tried to train my GPT on my blog post content, and then I tried to use it to do emails, and I was like, it's really wordy. Like I don't need 300 words to say no or say yes. So and then a small explanation. So I think I found it personally, and maybe I could have done a better prompting or something, but I found it to have a use case for every one of your common modes of writing. So for me, that's email and then web content.
Yeah, and I think that it is helpful because you're so right. Like we've all seen those emails and probably on a regular basis. Like it's a huge bunch of text in an email, and you're like, I don't know, do they just copy a blog post into this? And like when I get an email, I expect some short sentences, short paragraphs, some
Yeah,
bullet points. I expect like a page at the most, and then go and send me to whatever you want to send me to. Like let me opt into the longer blog post. And what's great about some of these things that we're talking about is this kind of ability to act more quickly and think on more of a high level, right? Like because we all woulda, shoulda, coulda want to make these email campaigns, right? We all want to put out a blog post every day, but we want it to be good and we want to have these kind of email sequences and all these things. But now with ChatGPT and all these other tools, now it's possible as long as we kind of have a good procedure, right? As long as we use these tools and we kind of know how to edit it to make it good. And so now all these kind of new things are possible here. And so what has you excited just about your own business and what you're able to do like more and better, faster, and like especially with the content writing, like what has AI hope opened up for you in the present and the future?
yeah. So I think it greatly accelerates my ability to communicate. Like I said, I prefer to communicate in spreadsheet, and so I think but most people prefer to consume information in words. And so it's greatly increased my ability to communicate, which I'm excited about. I think at a sort of a super macro level, I think what we've seen is that AI's capability starts to plateau around the sort of existing level of human knowledge because that's what it's being trained on. That might age poorly and it might be able to produce some really sort of exceptional breakthroughs. Most of those have only come in like constrained games like chess or Go or in sort of a general fields. It sort of achieves the level of performance that its training data has. But what I'm excited about is that it really sort of lifts all of humanity up to that level of base knowledge really rapidly, and so that's incredibly exciting. And then in terms of like within marketing, what am I seeing from like excellent use cases is the ability to have all parts of an organization contribute to marketing. And so, for example, we'll have engineers that would typically have never, like some of the like hardcore AI researchers, English as a second language, pre-AI would not be contributing to the marketing calendar. But the result of using AI is that they're capable of doing it and doing it in a way that no one else could. It's taking the knowledge that they have and then being capable of producing content that is understandable by everyone. And that's really exciting, is that it just brings more people to the table. And I'm seeing success from companies where they're empowering their people, empowering all parts of their organization to contribute, and that productivity lift that comes with AI, with more people involved, is huge.
Very nice. Yeah, right. So it's like the information accessibility both ways, right? In
Yep.
that now, like it used to be, like even 5 years ago, if I wanted to learn something, I'd be like, well, is there a course? Can I get a DVD? Should I order some book and wait in the mail? And now I'll like watch 10 YouTube videos about something. I'll like grab the transcript, put it into the ChatGPT and say, give me like 10 bullet points, and I'll look at those bullet points and kind of go back to the video and like jump to where I want, like, and
Yep.
kind of, and it's like learning a lot more stuff, but not at an expense of anything, right? You're not like learning it superficially. You're kind of like learning hours worth of stuff in like 10-20 minutes. And also that's great about how when we put things back in, when these teams contribute, they can all kind of put it in easily. And like you hear about how the translation in AI is like amazing compared to what we had a few years ago. And like there's been so many times when like I've had all these little pieces of writing, and I'm sure you have too, right? And I'm just like, I say ChatGPT, like make it make sense, right? Or I have something existing like a big blog post, and I'm like, well, I want to put these 3 ideas in here, so like tell me where to put it. And I'm just like, wow, it requires like very little editing. And so that's great about what you mentioned there about like people having success with AI. And I want to make sure that we talk up and hype up in a good way Originality AI. So do you have like a fun case study success story about Originality AI? Was that in a minute ago, or do we have like a really good one, just say like, hey, you should really use Originality AI because of this? What comes to mind?
Yeah, so it's unfortunately not a good news story, but more of a bad news story. But there was the recent March 5th update, that the March update from Google is ongoing. There was a March 5th update where they took manual action. Google took manual action against, when we looked at this study across 100,000 websites, 2% of those websites had a manual action applied to them, which resulted in them being de-indexed by Google. And what one of the very common themes across the majority of those sites was that the majority of their new content was AI generated. So they were using heavy AI generation to spam Google search results. Google identified those sites and then took a manual action against them. The sort of sad part was that we have spoken with a few of those website owners where they had no idea that their company was using AI. They were under the belief that that the writers were not using AI, but they just hired a lot of writers and were mass producing content. Content quality was still not exceptional, so there's sort of some question there. But when they came to us and they're like, we don't think any of our writers were using AI. We ran their content through our tool, and the vast majority of their content was AI generated. And so that's, their website, they had a policy to not use it, didn't have any control in place to ensure it wasn't being used, published a massive amount of content, and then ended up being de-indexed by Google as a result of getting wrapped up in the manual action update. And so that's what, if you're pro AI content and you want to publish it, awesome, that's your decision. If you're anti AI content and you don't want to publish it, great, that's also your decision as the website owner. But we want that decision to sort of rest with the website publisher and not with the writer that's being hired. And so that's sort of, yeah, unfortunately not a good news story, but that's what we've seen recently from a couple people that have had writers using it, using AI and publishing straight AI content without them being aware of it.
And that's totally okay to say, well, hey, the marketing message for my service, it can be positive, but it can also have this kind of negative aspect to it as far as like avoiding the dangers and like, hey, you need to use this tool to avoid getting de-indexed by Google and all these other problems. And so it's definitely pretty clear from what you're saying here that we need to make some kind of an AI checker as part of our workflow, and it should definitely be Originality.AI. And so that, because you said like this way, you can be the person who makes the decision of, am I going to use AI content or not? And it's kind of a gray area. And it sure seems like these days, like everyone uses it at some form of or another, right? They at least use
Yeah.
like a little bit of it. So it's not like a thing to be avoided. It's like, we don't want to avoid listening to rock and roll or avoid it getting in our automobile cars. So we still need to use this tool. But like if it can be detected and if Google will delist it, or if you're cranking out like an article every 5 minutes, like that's obviously garbage. So we need to like use this tool to sort of check on this. And so like, is it a loaded question you're asking about like the pricing here? Is it like a there's like it's a team, like an enterprise kind of plan, or like what's the price range for this kind of tool?
Yeah, so it's a credit-based system for $14.95. You get a bunch of credits, and then it's 1 cent per 100 words. Is the structure. So aim to make it pretty sort of achievable from a sort of any writer can use it to make sure that their content won't get flagged, and then also it can scale so that companies that are doing millions of words a month can use it. So yeah, for base price $14.95, and then a credit usage system if you go beyond the credits that you get with your subscription at 1 cent per 100 words.
Very nice. And that's a fun base price just to kick things off and get things started, right? To at least
Exactly.
look at your top content, your pillar content, your latest blog post, your social media, and just be like, well, how, even if you know you're using AI, like how much is being detected? And maybe they need to be edited, enhanced a little bit more. And especially if you're paying a writer, I mean, $14.95 is a drop in the bucket just to say, like, hey, all these hundreds or thousands I'm paying to have this content written, like, can I run it? Does it pass the smell test? And so as we're wrapping up our conversation here, Jon, and people are going to Originality.AI, do you have any like final lesson as far as using AI or using your tool specifically? Is there just like some kind of a feature or use case that you wish people knew more about as far as either AI itself or your tool?
So yeah, I think there's some common misconceptions in the world that anytime I chat, I like to sort of try and help educate around AI detection. So AI detectors, there's people can fall into kind of two camps sometimes, where it's like AI detectors are BS, they're not perfect, or AI detectors are perfect. And the truth, like most things, is that we live in a world where it's more complex than that. Detectors can have a high level of accuracy, but they do produce false positives and false negatives, and that can be challenging for companies to work through. And so that's important for people to understand. Like we're at sort of like a 99% accurate, 2.5 to 3% false positive rate on when we're sampling human content. And then the second piece is these are classifiers, and so that gives you kind of a probability uh, of the content being AI, not necessarily the amount of the content that is AI. So if it says it's 10% AI, that means the tool is 90% confident that the content is original. So I'd say those are kind of the two most common misconceptions that anytime and can cause a lot of pain when somebody says I got tagged for AI, but really it said 90% confident that it was human. So those are kind of the two most common misconceptions around AI detectors that I try and help educate people on.
And that's great education again. I'm glad you brought that up because when AI was new, someone fed one of these detectors the U.S. Constitution, and they said the
Yep.
Constitution was AI, and it was a really funny news story, and everyone laughed.
Yep.
And it's like you look at that and you say like, okay, that is a funny story, but that's just a lesson there. Like, well, you don't need to throw out this tool, and it's also like if your content keeps on getting these false positives, maybe it does need a little enhancing, right? Maybe it does need a little bit of editing if this keeps happening to you. And so it's good to know about these nuances, and it's good to know that this tool especially exists, Originality.AI, because I have been thinking about this every now and then. I have heard of like the detectors being mentioned, and sometimes like people meant they recommend them, but they're like, oh, I don't use it. And I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't help me. Which one should I use? So if you out there in podcast land say, hey, I'm using AI or I want to use more of it in my writing, but I'm worried about some of these things like, will Google delist me or is it not good enough? Well, then use Originality.AI. Go in and get that base package and play with it. And then once you get some value out of it, then continue and use more credits. Just make it part of your workflow and your process. So is Originality.AI the place to go at this point, John?
Yeah, go there. Anyone can email me. I'm jon@originality.ai, and you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Very nice. So that is Jon at originality.ai. And then on LinkedIn and Twitter, that's Jon Gillham, Gillham. But most importantly, go to originality.ai, click the button, sign up for an account, start using it. You'll be glad you did, and you'll have a lot of fun with this crazy AI world as you delve into the landscape or whatever the AI terminology wordage that they like to use. So originality.ai is the place to go. And thank you very much, John, for a fun AI conversation. I had a blast.
Awesome. Likewise. Thanks, Robert.